Okay, welcome everybody. Let's get started. My name is Scott Mora, Assistant Professor in Civil Environmental Engineering, also Faculty Director of CAP. It's my great honor to introduce Professor Mauro Salazar. Mauro is an Assistant Professor at TU Eindhoven, also associated with the Eindhoven AI Systems Institute. But the most important thing you should know about Mauro is he used to be in a rock band called Tipsy Road. He's an excellent keyboardist. So if you have any questions about music or what it's like to be a rock star, then make sure you query those up. But you know, he had a career opportunity in the rock band life, but decided to pursue PhD studies. Went to ETH Zürich, and while he was at ETH Zürich, actually was a visiting student at Stanford for 6 months, right?
Yep.
So for those of you who are thinking about your careers, the opportunity to be a visiting student at another campus, another environment can be transformative. Mauro can tell you about his story if you're interested. And then he finished his PhD at ETH Zürich, where he was actually working with the Ferrari Formula 1 team, which is super cool, like right at the bleeding edge of performance, doing controls and optimization. Then he did a postdoc for 1 year at Stanford across the Bay. So he's at home here with us in the Bay Area. And he did that for 1 year. I think at the same time was hired to become a professor at TU Eindhoven. So he's going to tell us about his work in controls and optimization for sustainable mobility. For the students in the audience, two things I want you to think about. One is think of questions, right? Raise your hand, feel welcome to interrupt him. He didn't give me permission for this, but interact, because it's a special opportunity to have Professor Salazar here. The second thing, especially for master's students, if you're interested in a PhD, TU Eindhoven gives you mandated 2 months of vacation. So maybe you find this interesting, you can talk to him about opportunities at TU Eindhoven. Without further ado, welcome Professor Salazar.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you. So, what a nice introduction. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here. Let's say, I shouldn't say it loud, but in the nice campus in this area, let's say. Today I'm going to take you on a journey from electric racing, so individual vehicles, top performance vehicles, to sustainable urban mobility. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge people who contributed to this work. My PhD students, where is it? Here. So we have Olaf and Jorn, Fabio, my great colleague Theo, Shenny, who recently graduated, Salomon, I co-supervised him, he was at Boston University with Christos Kassandras and Yanis Paschalidis, and my other great colleague, Maurice Hemels. And also, I'd like to highlight that with Theo and these three great PhD students, we're part of a consortium, a Dutch consortium, accelerating the way to zero emissions, Neon Research, you can also check it out. We work on electric mobility there, also together with a research center, TNO, and this very cool startup. It's no longer a startup, it's scaling up pretty massively. Lightyear, you can see the car here, and what you can notice about this car is that the roof is completely covered in solar panels, and this enables the car to recharge way less than usually, and therefore achieve incredible performance in terms of usability. You just need to recharge the car 20 times a year, which is basically nothing else.
That company, by the way, came out of the student-led solar car racing
exactly.
team, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this car actually was originally a student team called Solar Car. This year they did a solar caravan, because of course in the Netherlands everyone goes camping, and I don't know if you know that. And they won quite some competition, and some of them said, let's take it to the next step. And actually the type of integrated design they did, they really thought that the car through in terms of the high efficiency you need to achieve this kind of range and so on. It's quite cool. So it's very nice to work with them, of course, but you can also check out their website if you're interested. But okay, let's go back to research. So the reason why I work on mobility, it's because it has been facing quite some challenges lately. People are not really happy with mobility choices first, right? We all know that. I mean, we saw it in the skyrocketing of transportation network companies in the past decade. We have a huge congestion problem. Even with the pandemic, we didn't learn anything, I guess. I'm not going to comment about pollution, which I think pretty evident, more and more, unfortunately. And also noise pollution, which is not only annoying, it's actually bad for your health, and stress is becoming one of the most killing things we have in our society. It's really the number one killers. But okay, on the bright side, we're also witnessing at the advent of very interesting opportunities, ranging from autonomous driving, right, which is still a bit in its infancy, connectivity, the idea of sharing economies, and if you connect sharing economies with connectivity, you have transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft, right? The powertrain electrification, which is really pervading the market, and special purpose design. And now if you, of course, a question is, okay, we have all these disruptive technologies, they could backfire if implemented wrongly. And we saw it through the years. I'm not gonna go into details here, right? So it's really important to know, okay, how can we best combine all these opportunities in order to face current and future mobility challenges? And my vision here is we're gonna have autonomous, connected, and electrified intermodal mobility systems. And I'm putting a lot of emphasis on intermodal, which is why it's even more bold than the other words, okay? You've seen in some slides why. Now, if you deploy this kind of system, you really need to make the best out of it. You really need to tailor its design and operation to the specific area where you're deploying it. So it means you need tools that enable to, we're talking about making the best out of it and so on and so on, to optimize the design and the operation. And that's what we work on mostly in the research we do. On the individual vehicle level, electric powertrain design problems, which topology to choose, which components, which technologies, which sizing, how to connect them, right? In-wheel motors, central drive motor, and so on and so forth. How to coordinate them to make the best out of them. And the same also, we have design and control problems also for, let me remove this, also for transportation systems. Okay. And through the talk, I'm going to go from the individual vehicle level to the transportation system. So as Scott said, please interrupt me anytime if you have a question. It has to be a discussion. Really want it to be interactive. It's so nice to be in person again. Okay, let's start with the individual vehicle problem. So I've been working a lot on electrification. And we all know, I mean, passenger cars have been electrified. They're becoming fully electric, also trucks. But we're also witnessing this in racing. And today, you heard it, I mean, also have a sweet tooth for racing due to my past in Formula 1. But also, racing mathematically is a more general problem than the conventional vehicle design and control problem first. So if you can solve racing, you solve also automatically that. You're dealing with top-notch technologies, which will then pervade the market. Think about disc brakes. They were introduced by Lotus in the 50s to reduce the braking distance and reduce lap time. Now, every car has disc brakes. And it's really important to be as efficient as possible. Every millijoule of onboard energy counts. Okay? Now, racing is quite broad. You may have this wonderful red car that is breaking my heart every year. Hopefully next year we'll do better, but okay, which is Formula 1 car. It's hybrid electric. It's 1.6 liters engine with a very complex hybrid electric system that enables it to reach incredible performance. In Formula types of races, what you're given is a number of laps and you want to be the first one crossing the finish line. You could also have hybrid electric endurance racing, the 24 hours of Le Mans. Probably you're familiar with that. There you're given 24 hours, so race time, and you want to be the one driving the furthest. You may have Formula E, so Formula type of racing, full electric. Of course, you have to drive slower due to energy consumption considerations. And also endurance, electric endurance racing. So the same as above, but with a full electric car. This is not really a reality yet. And in fact, where is it? Here. If you zoom in here, you see that this is the logo of our university. So this is another very cool student team we have. So, something that really struck me when I arrived at TUE. Student teams are really doing incredible things. This team wants to drive the 24 hours of Le Mans fully electric. So today I'm going to talk about full electric racing and about electric endurance racing, because endurance racing, you will see, is again a more general problem that comprises Formula type of racing. Okay. You can imagine we're racing electrically for 24 hours, so what you have to do every now and then is get out of the of the racetrack, go into the pit lane and recharge. And it's not refueling. Okay? So it takes time, which means energy is super expensive. You really need to make the best out of it. And we have quite some challenges. Some of them are, the first two you can see there, are related to the battery. They're really working a lot on battery technologies. They can recharge now from 20 to 80% in 7.5 minutes, but they're aiming at slashing this number in 2. Okay? And then since 7.5 minutes is very little, but compared to refueling, it's still a lot, you need to make the best out of the energy you have on board. So you really need to optimize the efficiency of the powertrain in terms of design and control. Yes?
You just swap the battery?
No, they don't want. That's a very good point. You could do that, of course. They want to do recharging because also what they want to do is also their let's say the way they present themselves, this in-motion team is really reaching very high charging performance. So that it's not then limited to racing. But it's a very good question. Yeah. Why don't you just swap the battery? Of course. In Formula E, what they used to do, which is even simpler, swap the car. You have another car, and yeah. Why not? But okay, in this case, we want to recharge. And also, you need to decide when do you stop and how long the stints should be. A stint is a sequence of race laps. Okay? Good. Within the stint, once you've decided how many laps to drive, you also need to decide how. Also optimize the operation there. So it's quite a multi-level problem. Yes? It's a stint is a sequence of laps between pit stop and pit stop. Yeah? Good. So we need tools for race optimal design and control. We all agree on that, right? So how did we look at this problem? We decomposed the problem. You have a high-level problem where basically you're given the race time, 6 hours, 24 hours for Le Mans, and so on and so forth. You need to decide how many pit stops you will do, right? How many laps to drive between pit stops, how long to charge. How long to charge means how much to charge. To make an informed decision here, you need to know, given how many laps you want to drive and how much energy you have on board, what's the stint time? How long is it going to take me to drive? To get the stint time, well, which stint time would you like to have? Anyone? No, the minimum one, right? So you have a low-level optimization problem whereby given the stint length, so the number of laps you want to drive, the charge time, how much energy you have on board, you want to get the optimal stint time. And doing that, you have to solve the optimal in-stint operation problem. This lower problem here, which we're going to focus on right now, is the formula type of driving problem. Given a number of laps, it could be a race, what's the minimum stint time or lap time strategies? Make sense? Right. Okay, how did we solve it? So, we want to minimize stint time, right? You can see it here. We have a state variables, kinetic energy, so speed, but we look at the 1D model, battery energy, and then it looks kind of like a hybrid electric vehicle, meaning that this time, fuel would be the battery, and battery in the hybrid electric are the temperatures, right? You cannot do whatever you want with the components because they're going to overheat. So you have an energy buffer there somehow. Your input is basically the powertrain operation. You want to minimize stint time, but we frame the problem in space domain. The variable is not time, but space, because you're minimizing time. Space, you know how long the stint is. I give you the number of laps, you know how many kilometers you're driving, right? Simpler. Then you need to minimize the integral of dTds, which is the lethargy, how slow you are per unit time. It's the inverse of speed. We frame it as a convex optimization problem. To make it interactive, have any idea why? Why should we do it? Why should we frame it as a convex optimization problem? Why would we do so? Too obvious question, maybe?
Globally optimal.
Yes, and?
Improve optimality and it's relatively fast.
Yeah. I mean, we want to know for combinations of number of laps and charge time what's the best operation. So it's still offline, but if it doesn't take forever, it's not bad, right? So global optimality. But if you look at this constraint, right? Sorry for that. It's not convex. The function of 1 over v is convex for positive v, but that constraint is not convex, right? So what we do are called lossless relaxations. So basically, we put inequality constraints and show that at the optimum, and you can check the paper, at the optimum, they will hold with equality. The optimality will push you there. If you're minimizing lethargy and I give you a speed, it doesn't make sense to choose a higher lethargy. You want to push it down. And that's the reasoning we use throughout the framework. Okay? Now, one other thing I'd like to show you in this problem is the vehicle dynamics. So we try to keep it convex, but still capture it somehow. So since we're in the Netherlands, we took a bicycle model, which we like a lot, and we condensed the 4 wheels into 2 wheels. And what we do, we assume very small angles. So all these very nice angles, basically we'll have a sine of 0 and a cosine of 1, which is quite aggressive for pure vehicle dynamics. So forgive me if we do so, but this way we maintain convexity. And if you validate it, for this type of racing where you have a lot of downforce, it's not that bad. If you're drifting, it's a problem. But in this case, it's pretty good. We then have the longitudinal force balances that change in kinetic energy in space. And if you do the lateral balance, well, basically the lateral force depends on kinetic energy. The radius of curvature, RC, is given. We need to provide it. And it has to be equal to the lateral forces. Okay? We have some more force balances, and we connect the tires to the tarmac with friction circles, which can be expressed as norm 2 inequalities, which are second-order conic constraints. So basically, you can also check the manuscript for the rest of the models, but we end up with a second-order conic program, which we can efficiently solve via convex optimization. Right? So now we have this big model. We provide a number of laps, an amount of energy, and what's the optimum? In this case, quite an extreme case, you have 11 laps, 5 minutes of charging. If you look in the first plot, you have the speed profile, which is pretty repetitive. You can also appreciate the fact that the electric motor is a bit mild in the operation. Right? It goes into regenerative braking pretty early. Why? You're energy limited. And also it does some kind of derating. If you look. Why? It's overheating. Right? It's a problem there. And since it has this kind of mild type of driving, you're doing a lot of regenerative braking and not using much the hydraulic brakes. Now, this is one scenario. We're using convex optimization, so in a matter of seconds, you get a solution for many laps. Okay? So you can do a scan. And in Formula 1, they were super fond of always looking at sensitivities and what happens if I change this, if I change that. If you have a underlying convex framework, you can answer very quickly. So you can get, okay, charge as a function of charge time and number of laps, what is the stint time? So we have what we need from the low-level problem, which comes for free with the powertrain operation we can then use for online control later on. Okay? So this brings me to the high-level problem. Okay? We have the stint time now. So we can frame the high-level problem. And the way we do it, basically we want to maximize race distance, so the number of laps. Your state variable is the elapsed time, how long have you been driving, and your inputs are how much you charge, how many laps you do, and whether you take the pit stop or not. We take this map, we fit it, because we need a convex relationship, and we use this quadratic fitting approach, which is convex if Q is a positive semi-definite matrix, which fits very well, as you can see there. So we can now connect the stint time with the charge and the number of laps. And then, of course, you could say, okay, you know what, for the number of stops or stints I'm going to take, I'm just going to enumerate. I can solve for 1, for 2, for 3. I mean, it's fast. This takes this. But we can do better than that. With some binary variables telling whether you take the stint or not. Assuming that if you take a stint, then you've also taken all the preceding stints. Right? You can use it, and you can use a big M formulation. You can look, okay, the stint time has to be on this surface. If you don't take the stint time, it has to be greater or equal than 0 and minus infinity, basically, from the first two equations. If you don't take the stint, the number of laps is going to be 0 because Bpit is going to be 0. So basically, n laps, you cannot virtually drive. With this trick, we can also jointly optimize the number of stints and stops. Okay. We can rewrite everything as a second-order conic constraint also for the high-level problem, and we get a mixed integer or mixed binary SOCP that you can solve in a second for the entire race of 6 hours. Okay. How does it look like? Here you can see the optimal solution has 15 stops. We chose 6 hours more for, let's say, pedagogical reasons. We can solve also 24 hours, but then you don't understand anything in the plot. So this is for 6 hours. in Zandvoort, where they just had the Formula One race last weekend. You could ask, okay, but you're optimizing everything. Why should we do that? Can't you just take your car, drive like an animal, recharge fully, push, recharge, push. And if you do this, you do 30% less laps, which is a lot. Basically, at some point, I mean, here you would say, okay, let's go home. It's really important to optimize it. And another thing I said, we could enumerate and check what, I just pre-select the number of stops and optimize that. Why should I also optimize the number of stops? So if you choose the number of stops and optimize the rest, depending on the choice, like in this case for 7 stops, you would end up with 2 laps less than your opponent, which is a lot again. So it's really crucial to jointly optimize everything, accounting really for this multi-scale structure. Make sense? With the bio? Fantastic. So of course this is not limited to racing. Okay, you could also use this for eco-driving if you plan a route, and for other problems. And in fact, we have applied these methodologies. Yes?
What was the state of charge of the vehicle? Was it going down to halfway or mostly empty?
So the way we operated it, it's, where is it? No, no, it was here, sorry. Qua. We would go to basically 30%. So we don't want to hit the overpotentials of the battery. Also, we're not recharging above 60 or 70%, because then if you go above, it takes longer. And the way we framed it, you want to always be at maximum SOC due to efficiency reasons. So we would always recharge to the maximum and discharge less, maybe. That's the way you frame it. So we recharge afterwards. The charging happens after the stint. If you formulate it that way, you can do it. It took us a bit of thinking. But yeah, you always start from full and go down, because then your open circuit voltage is slightly higher, so it's better. Make sense? Good.
Is there only one car on the track?
Very good question. No. So this is without, the other cars are away. That's a very important point. It's a free traffic problem. What you could do then is to use this approach as you drive to re-optimize. And since it takes you 1 second to redo it, you can also start, I think in Ferrari we should also think about that, how to really strategically plan tire changes and recharging and so on and so forth. Yeah? Good. Now, this you can really apply to a plethora of vehicles, and also we're looking, from micromobility to trucks, we're also looking at e-flying, and we have another question. Fantastic.
Can you elaborate the thermal part again?
Yes. I'm gonna so I have a plot here. Wait. Yeah. So what's happening here? You cannot. We don't have the problem with the temperature, but it's overheating. You can see that the electric motor is becoming less aggressive.
Sorry, what's PM?
PM is the mechanical power of the electric motor. How much you're pushing with it's a throttle basically. It gets a bit milder because you're overheating the electric motor. With the battery, in contrast, that's pretty interesting. We're cooling it down as we drive. Because when we charge, we're really, full power all the time, right? So as we drive, it's cooling down. That was pretty fun result to find out. In this case, yeah.
You don't cool the motor.
Yeah. Of course, there is some cooling, but it's not enough. Then, of course, this becomes also a design problem. How do I design maybe there's other, they're looking at other technologies where while you charge, you're also cooling down components, of course.
But you're not modeling the thermodynamics within the car and the optimization?
We are, for the individual components, yes.
Oh, okay.
We are.
Oh, you mentioned.
No, I skipped it because of time. But if you check this manuscript, you can find it there. Yeah. And we also did some tricks, let's say, to keep it complex. I'll figure it out, because you're in space domain, so it gets...
But it's the thermodynamics, just to be clear, of the powertrain components.
Yeah.
There's not the cabin, comfort, interior comfort is not an objective here.
No.
Yeah.
Driver has to survive. That's...
Okay, the driver has to survive.
Yeah. Okay. Yes? Fantastic. So now we're, of course, applying these methods. You can apply to a plethora of vehicles. Yesterday I was at Lyft and I showed them the design of micromobility vehicles. Or you can go to trucks, or also to other applications. The core idea of our research is really devising models that are accurate enough whilst preserving computational tractability, if possible, convexity. And you'll see in the next slides how this is true, not all the time, mostly. So this brings me to the transportation system part of this talk. And to get back about motivation, we really have this congestion problems with noise, pollution, and this we really need to solve. And we have autonomous driving that is reaching maturity and may enable the deployment of ad hoc optimized electric AMOD fleet. If you're using this fleet to just provide on-demand mobility, you don't need it to be made out of trucks, right? You don't care. You can downsize. You can also size the battery. One challenge here is that the design of an individual vehicle, if you have a fleet of vehicles, must account for the intended fleet level operation, which in turn must account for which kind of vehicles you have. Right? If you have a large battery, you charge less often than if you have a small battery. Though these problems are very intimately connected. So our question is, how do we solve it? It's a multi-scale optimization problem. And here I'm just going to have kind of a trailer. We're going to present it at CDC. But it could be nice to then have some discussions, maybe also offline. So basically, the way we solve it is that you are given demands in a deterministic fashion. Here, like in yellow, one demand, in red, another demand. They happen at different moments in time. You can pre-compute shortest path and so on, so you can know when they start, when they end. You put them on a directed acyclic graph, this type, so that you can decide with your vehicle which demands to serve. So it becomes like a task-oriented type of graph. And on top of that, we also devise a graph which keeps track of the state of energy of the vehicles. You can see here, right? So in this case, for instance, the vehicle is servicing demand 1, 2, and you can see this green arrow, which means that it's going to then afterwards recharge the battery. And that's a schedule you could have, right? We do this transformation with a lot of binary variables and tensors. And it enables us to jointly optimize the number of vehicles, whether you have the vehicles or not, the individual battery size of the vehicles, and their operation, the operation of the fleet. What you get, however, is a massive mixed integer linear program. So if you solve it with the correct method, you have global optimality guarantees if you solve it, because it explodes. So what we did was to actually take demands from the taxi demand of Manhattan and sample them and solve smaller instances. Of course, you're going to be a bit more conservative, but what we want to see is a distribution of the optimal design. Understand what, on average, the optimal design operation is. Right? Because in the end, you want to be able to be robust. And here you can see, and I think that you have 4 plots for 7 days in a week, where for each day we sample like 100 demands, right? 100 families of demands we try to service. What you can really see is that the battery size, the left top plot, is about 20 kilowatt hours. So actually, I feel with a 20 kilowatt hour battery size would be enough. So if you compare it to a fleet with a 50 kilowatt hour, so Tesla Model 3 or a Nissan Leaf or so, you would have a way smaller battery, which would enable you to save up to 20% in terms of energy consumption, because the weight of the vehicle, all of a sudden, is smaller. Of course, you need to recharge multiple times, but you're recharging less energy because you're using less energy. So if you schedule that well, you're also way more efficient. Okay? This is a very important consideration. Of course, now we're looking at solution schemes, robustness of the solution, and not that you implement a perfectly optimized design and then you add one demand and you fail, because it's no longer feasible. That's very important. And also jointly designing the infrastructure. Which type of chargers, where, and so on, and how many, and so on and so forth. Okay? Okay, now we have designed our fleet. We're super happy with that. So we're done, right? So we have traffic.
So just a clarifying question.
Yeah.
In these last results, are we considering the cost of the charging infrastructure and also
No.
constraints on real estate?
No,
So it's free.
there's some predefined locations.
Okay.
We are not yet looking whether there are conflicts there. This is, let's say, work in progress now. That's something very important. You could joint optimize the location. It's other binary variables. The solver didn't like it. let's say. So we really need ways of solving, and of course we have to sacrifice global optimality. Yeah.
Actually solved some similar problems.
Yeah.
And with the network growing, MILP is just not going to do.
No.
What are the sacrifices are you thinking of?
So global optimality. So what we sacrifice is global optimality, right? I really like when I can say this is the overall best. And my colleagues tell me, yeah, but your model is not accurate enough. Then you have a discussion which becomes philosophical. But okay, in this case, what you can do is to start saying, okay, if these two demands are close, they become one demand, and you will service both. And we noticed that this type of heuristics, there was quite some work done also by Javier Unsomora and Daniela Rus and so on, at MIT using graph searching types of algorithms. This can help. Of course, you're throwing away global optimality, but if you do a comparison, you're not doing that bad. And then at some point, what you want to do is you will never operate the fleet in a globally optimal fashion. So you want something that is good. Good is already way better than state of the art. But it's a very important question. Yeah, no, it's 3 search types of algorithms. But we can talk also later because, yeah, we're looking at options. Yeah.
This reduction to 20 kilowatt hour battery would entail a reduction in range, right?
Yes. But it's not you recharge more often. And you have to recharge less because you need less energy. So in this case, it works. So that's a very important consideration. Another consideration you could do, can I just have one battery size, please, and produce one vehicle and not 10 types of vehicles? And manufacturing costs. We're also looking at that. Yeah, but yeah, of course. But it's quite, it's a lot. It's less than half. So in terms of cost, it's a big difference. Yes?
And based on Scott's question, you're ignoring deadheads to go to recharging stations?
No. This we account. So we do a lot of pre-processing. So you look at the demands, and then from the end of each demand, going to the next demand, if it's compatible, we look, okay, what is the closest charging station, how long would the detour be? You subtract that time, and then the time that you have available is how much you can recharge, max. Now that we look at. But you don't look whether 2 vehicles come together because of the way we frame the problem. Yeah.
Just related to that question, there's Sumin's part of a project where we found that there's an overhead time associated with starting the charging. Tesla's quite good. Maybe you can get it done in like 30 seconds, but there's some, especially American charging infrastructure companies where it can take like 5 minutes. It's like a significant portion.
Okay.
Of the
Yeah.
But yeah, those are details we're not worried about right now.
No, and you could readily include it, right? Every time you go to charge,
Sure.
you add also this time. That's really not a problem. That's not the problem of the framework. The problem is that it's mixed integer and it's massive. That's the real problem. No, that could be readily implemented. So good. We have a fleet of autonomous vehicles. We can centrally control them. They're autonomous, connected, electrified, intelligent. So we're done, right? But the problem of cars, and that's why I don't like them, except in racing, is that if these cars would be autonomous, connected, electrified, which arguably are not, okay, they have one big problem. They eat a lot of space. So their throughput efficiency is very bad, right? You could take these people, put them on public transit, right? 3 buses, 1 light rail train, this 1 trolley bus from Zurich, but any bus also here, right? Or the BART or whatever. But this is not point to point, right? I don't have to go to the same place where Scott needs to go, right? So our question we had, and this was work I did at Stanford with Marco when I started there. Can we get the best of both worlds? What happens if we do intermodal autonomous mobility on demand? To model this, we have a graph for roads. Arcs are road links, the dots are the nodes are intersections. You also have trees for public transit. You have a walk in the graph, so that basically you could say, okay, I'm here, I get on public transit, I get out, I get on a car. You can have switching times, no problem. And you can represent everything without binary variables, which we saw it's a problem. We use a mesoscopic perspective. We represent, therefore, customers and vehicles as flows, as fluids, per unit time. We take a steady state planning perspective, okay? So there's still one problem to solve, which is travel time. the more cars are, this is the Bpr model, you probably know way better than me. The more cars you have on an arc, travel time is going to start to increase. If you have private vehicles, what we did as a first approach, we said we don't want to change their habits. We don't want to go above their indifference threshold. So if your trip is 12 or 13 minutes, you're not going to notice. So we allow for this gap, and from this gap, we get a capacity for MOD. We don't want to disrupt private vehicle flows. That's the politically correct way of, let's say, explaining this. To be very honest with you, if you do this, travel time is more or less constant here. Private vehicles don't change, so this is a linear term. You can have a linear travel time, which is very nice because in the end you have a very big problem where you express as a linear program if you combine travel time and cost of operation, right? What I'm going to show here is what happens if you do pure MOD and if you do intermodal MOD. And here you can really do a fair comparison from a planning perspective because you're comparing two global optima, the best possible performance of both. You don't have controllers that are maybe biased or work differently well for the two systems. And what you see is that if you do intermodality for real-world data of Berlin and New York City, two very different cities, you can improve CO2 emissions, cost, and travel time by 20 to 50%. So that's why I said at the beginning, intermodality is the way to go. Autonomous vehicles should help us not to use, autonomous cars should help us not to use cars. There's a problem, however. If this is the way to go, we're starting to share cars in this idealized world. If MOD vehicles become predominant, they will first affect travel time for us, right? Because if you have more flows, the travel time is gonna. So no way you're below the indifference level. Since you're not below the indifference threshold, maybe people start rerouting. You use Google Maps and there's a congestion, you change in a user-centric fashion. So nonlinearity and game theoretical problem. Right? So it's kind of a bi-level problem. We wish we could solve it as a Stackelberg equilibrium problem. In the end, we ended up solving it as a Nash equilibrium problem. Because basically what we did was to say, okay, you have our intermodal fleet. We have to decide the user's flows, XU, the rebalancing vehicles flows, the empty vehicles, knowing that the private flows will react in a traffic assignment problem type of reaction to our flows. And the way we solved it was to iterate between the two. It converged very quickly also to the same point with different initial conditions. However, we have no guarantees that that's the unique equilibrium. And the first thing we did was, okay, what happens if we only have cars? In one case, if you only have private vehicles, it's people arrive and park, but they're selfish, so it's a user-centric traffic equilibrium. In our case, we centrally control, it's a system optimum. And if you look at the penetration level, so here we predefine which fraction of the population uses which type of system, private vehicles or our intermodal MOD system. For only cars, you see that the travel time, the more people use our system, goes up. Any idea why? Doesn't make sense. We're centrally controlling the system optimum.
What is the x-axis again?
It's a penetration. So which fraction of the population is using our system? 100% is everyone uses the system or system optimum. 0% everyone uses their private car. So user equilibria are worse than system optimum. In our case, system optimum is worse than the equilibrium. You can also see the difference in flows. And the main problem is that in the system optimum, you have rebalancing flows. You have empty vehicles also driving around. And you know that there were some articles showing that transportation network companies worsen the traffic situation in major metropolitan cities in the US, including San Francisco. That's what you're observing. Even though if you have the smartest controller doing worse. Okay? Now, if you add public transit, it starts getting better. If you add walking, even better. And if you add, let's say, the Dutch way cycling, this is a rush hour in Eindhoven in the Netherlands, it's way better. So intermodal with active mode is really the way to go. And if you look at it, 20% less kilometers traveled. And here we only have a monetarily oriented objective, minimize travel time. Not looking at the benefits of commuting or the fact that it's nice to cycle around. Just minimizing travel time. We're halving travel time. It's amazing. But here there's a problem. If you look at the left plot, you see the travel time experienced by the MOD users in red, the travel time experienced by the private vehicle users in blue. You should notice a problem when basically everyone is using MOD. What's the problem? Okay, would this happen in reality? Look deep into your soul. Would this happen? Scott, what would you do then?
Well, if I'm understanding correctly, it seems if I have a choice to do automated on-demand or private, it's evident that my travel time is less with private.
So
I choose private, and it
Yeah.
would flip me.
yeah,
flip it
so
back to
Scott is
left.
private. I also go private, I'm honest. And then everyone here starts to go private, and before you know, you're back to the initial mess. And on the one hand, this is a pain in the neck, because system optima are not equilibrium most of times. On the other hand, mathematically, it's extremely fascinating. Right? And the point is that system optima, that every commute, some users must sacrifice part of their welfare for the sake of others, so that others can be faster. So that on average, we're faster. But if you're the one yielding, if you're the one sacrificing, you're not really happy, right? Look at this super simple example. Fast arc with autonomous cars and then a slower arc. What I did today, taking the BART and then walking. What would happen in this equilibrium, more and more people use the first arc until it gets congested and as slow as the second arc. That's a user-centric equilibrium. But arguably, if you move a bit of people from the first arc to the second one, the average travel time goes down because the first arc gets gets faster, right? So one way of achieving these are monetary tolls. And I don't need to talk about monetary tolls here. I mean, there's plenty of literature that date back a century from Pigou and right? When they started studying the problem, how do we align selfish users with the system optimum? But they're not, they discriminate with respect to income. So I really didn't like them when they started, because usually low-income people are the ones with the lowest, with the longest commute already. So it's not fair. Another very cool approach is artificial currencies. And there was a very nice paper from ETH that instantiated some artificial currency framework. And there were some others. The problem here is that they're mostly based on auction mechanisms. So it's basically like buying an airplane ticket, but more difficult. So I have a lot of decision fatigue if you do that. How much should I bid so that I'm sure they're going to get the first? I mean, when you travel, you just want to know, okay, what's the travel time, what's the price, I do it. So what we did was really to look at that and instantiate a simple payment transaction mechanism, which leverages artificial currencies so that we can achieve the system optimum, accounting for the urgency of the users. And the last part of the talk I will quickly go through, but please interrupt me if it's unclear. It's a very simplified framework. 2 arcs, and you'll see it's already, if you check the paper, it's already complicated enough. And if you're really interested, we have a position open on this, because it's very challenging. So every day people go from one node to the other, let's say from San Francisco to Berkeley. And you have 2 possibilities, car or public transit. 1-0 car, 0-1 public transit. The flow of people influence travel time. Good. The aggregate is the average of the choices of each individual user, right? 20%, 80%. Good. Municipality only cares about the aggregate flows. They would like to minimize some cost, which is reflected in an optimal distribution, X star. This is a system optimum. Now, in contrast to unfair monetary tolls, we use an artificial currency in line with this paper from ETH. We call it karma. The brilliant idea there is that can neither be bought nor exchanged. Your points only change as you travel. How? If you go fast, you pay P1. If you go slow, you receive R2. So the second price is negative. Okay? Now, your karma account, the next day will be your karma account today minus what you pay. Make sense? And you cannot go negative in karma, otherwise it doesn't make sense. Everyone would go to minus infinity and you don't have a currency. Yes? So that's pretty simple payment transaction. Good. You design the price, well, you want the system optimum to be such that then the population's karma is constant, so that in the discrete time problem, it's an equilibrium there. You can stay there. It's feasible to always have the optimal distribution. So basically it means that the ratio between the prices is determined by the ratio of the flows. And then you could say, okay, fine, we still have 1 degree of freedom, right? because we have two prices. But actually, if I tell you 50-50, in terms of 50%, 50%, if I do 100 minus 100, 1,000 minus 1,000, or whatever, it doesn't change anything. So the magnitude of the prices is irrelevant. So it became not a control problem, a system stability problem we studied. So how did we model the individual users? This is very crucial. You want to minimize discomfort, like travel time, depending on the sensitivity you have today. If I have to give a talk in Berkeley, I'm more on a rush than if I just coming here for a stroll, right? In conventional static tolling schemes, users want to minimize basically the discomfort multiplied with the value of time, basically their income or how much on a rush they are, plus the prices, and you check, and it's a static optimization problem. That's pretty simple, right? Here that's not the case. If you go fast today, tomorrow you have to go slow. So you're playing against your future self. That's why I said it gets so complicated. So we take kind of an MPC perspective. You have a time horizon, maybe a week. You say, okay, the rest of the week I will have Y bar, so 20%, 80%, 30%, 70%, assuming I will have the average of the sensitivity. So what you minimize is discomfort today, the first term, plus the discomfort you expect to have the rest of the week. Okay? And with your karma level, well, we look like you don't want to go below some kind of reference level you have in mind. Okay? This can change for any user, but basically you want to stay balanced somehow. Now, if you assume an infinite amount of users, and we assume that every day you have the wardrobe equilibrium, so like in traffic theory. Okay, wardrobe Nash, we have an infinite amount of users, so it's the same. You look at every day, people have reached the wardrobe equilibrium, and you want to see where this wardrobe equilibrium goes, and whether it will converge to the system optimum. And if you check the paper for the proof, it works. And here, just really quick, we gave a lot of simulation, lots of karma to the individuals. At the beginning, they have a lot of karma, so they go to the user-centric equilibrium. So you see that basically 30% more travel time. And then it goes down. You converge to the system optimum. You can also see it here because the karma levels converge with this stationary distribution. You could also say, but wait a sec. I could actually, I know it's 55% and 40%. This is the right distribution. You could say, okay, now, on average, randomly every day decide who goes where, right? But you're not taking into account the urgency of people. This way you give way more freedom to people. You just need to play along. You give them 30% less travel time. And on top of that, compared to an urgency unaware optimum, but urgency unaware allocation, a 15% improvement in the perceived discomfort. What matters is how much you are in a rush, how sensitive you are to travel time. So in this way, we really get the best of both worlds. And of course, you saw it just a first step. And we started also looking at learning to adjust the pricing online because, of course, I mean, assuming that people every morning solve a mixed integer linear program is a bit, it's a model, but okay. All right, so if you're interested, you can have further discussions here. Before I conclude, we're going to have a very nice workshop where Scott participated one or 2 years ago, I don't recall, on autonomous, connected, and electrified mobility. If you're interested in these topics, at CDC, and you're coming to CDC, you can register for it. It would be great to have you there. Otherwise, I've arrived to my last slide. And I really think that we're in the midst of a very nice transformation in the mobility ecosystem with a lot of opportunities and a lot of very challenging and interesting problems which are not only interdisciplinary, but transdisciplinary. And I think that you're really in the right position to contribute to this. The problems are urgent, we have the technologies, we have the tools. So I think we can really solve these problems and give a contribution to science and hopefully and ultimately to society. So that was my last slide. Before I forget, if you want to come over as a PhD, postdoc, or only as a visitor and experience the very technological mobility paradigm we have in the Netherlands, which is the bicycle, you're more than welcome to contact me. Thank you.
We're almost right at time, so you can probably take one question or two if it's quick. and priority to the students. Participation is part of your grade.
Yeah.
I have a question about like the way that the mechanism, the karma mechanism for getting people to use public transit is like implementable. Would people say still be able to pay to use their car in the event that they like just can't use public transport for their use case?
Yes, that's really the point. So you have these points, and when you're on a rush and you really need it, you pay the points, and then, I don't know, you have to go to the airport. It's going to take you way less time because there's less car on the road. So it's really efficient then.
Yeah. So like say you're out of points, you know, and you can't just like ride public transit but then get more points, can you still just pay to use the road because it's
Yeah, but then it would become a monetary mechanism. So I would say no. So that's why you need to have, we assume that agents plan to still have some reserve, right?
pretty strict?
Right? That's the way we envision it. How you would implement, I mean, I always get the question, how do you implement it in practice? I have no idea. It's really, I mean, how, one other aspect, the perception of discomfort. I like to bike every morning to work. It takes me 20 minutes, I love it. Okay? It takes me twice as much as by car. But for me, discomfort would be sitting in a car. I need to bike to energize. Other people really don't like it. I have a colleague from Spain, and she said, no, when it rains, for me, I want to go by car, and it's fair. I mean, we're different, right? Which means a different discomfort perception. So maybe you should switch the prices. So maybe you should tailor the pricing to people. I think it's a very challenging, an interesting problem. Maybe it's infeasible, and that's it. Yeah. Very good question.
All right, if you have more questions, then feel welcome to ask Mauro afterwards. Let's give him a final hand and thank him for coming and sharing his work.
Thank you.